This week's episode is brought to you by Mega Dodo Productions, publishers of the Encyclopedia Galactica and the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't panic!
Back in the 70s and 80s, before the advent of VHS, chances are if you saw a classic movie, it was on the 4:30 movie. With their famous theme weeks, it was a chance to see movies you never saw and get reacquainted with some old classics. So, join us now for the 4:30 movie.
This week, it's Vampire Week on the 4:30 movie.
Scary.
This is Mark Altman.
I love to count.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Wonderful.
I'm here.
Scary movies.
I'm here with my expert band of kindergartners here to program a Vampire Week on the 4:30
You
movie.
can say vampire, it's okay.
Vampire
We're in
Week.
America.
Okay. Vampire Week. And I'm thrilled to celebrate Halloween with this great group of vampire experts, of slayers. I got Mr. Steven Melching, writer, producer for television over here. Welcome, Steve.
Good evening.
Concept designer, Daren Dochterman.
Blah.
And, of course, film and TV writer, Ashley E. Miller. Welcome back to the show.
I never drink wine.
Only vodka. So, and of course, I'm Mark A. Altman. And this week, we'll be looking at, in honor of Halloween, vampire movies. And now I want to remind you that only motion pictures are eligible. We won't be looking at TV shows. So when you all start yelling, why didn't you talk about Buffy? You know why? Because Buffy the Vampire movie sucked, okay? So we're not talking about the TV. We're not talking about TV. If it was TV, I'm sure we would be doing Buffy and Supernatural and all these other X-Files.
That's a totally different podcast altogether.
Now, here's my question. Is something like The Night Stalker eligible? Because, of course, that was a TV movie.
No.
Okay, there you go.
Because they're theatrical motion pictures.
In your
television.
description, TV movie.
There you go.
TV.
Okay, very good.
TV.
So if we don't mention Dan Curtis's classic Night Stalker, Night Strangler duology, that is why.
That's correct.
Okay.
Don't look for them in any other part of this podcast.
Because as we all know, movies trump television.
Or at least they used to.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm going to start with Steve Melching, Monday.
Well, I'm going to bring out a film that would actually probably be good for the 4:30 movie because it is not a movie that is readily available to watch. I really wanted to rewatch this movie, and I have wanted to rewatch it for years. But it's simply not available. I found it on one obscure streaming service.
I'm really interested in what you're going to say.
It is out of print on DVD. It is not available on Blu-ray. I think it's available as an import on Blu-ray.
Is it on Viewmaster?
No, it is not on Viewmaster either.
Is it bigger than a bread box?
Is it smaller than a coffin?
So I'm talking about a film that came out in 1987 that was probably overshadowed by another popular vampire film earlier
Vamp
that
with
year.
Grace Jones.
Dude.
It is Kathryn Bigelow's Near Dark. Now, this is a film, if you're not aware of it,
Well,
which you may not be.
scratch that off my
list.
Right? Scratched off mine.
It is a very difficult film to see. Unfortunately, it's a crime that this film is not available in high definition. I mean, it is, after all, directed by Kathryn Bigelow, who has won the Oscar for directing The Hurt Locker, went on to direct Point Break, Hurt Locker, Zero Dark 30, many other films. A lot of her films are not available on home video. But anyway, Near Dark. Best described as a vampire western. It's about a young guy played by Adrian Pasdar who crosses paths with a attractive young woman who turns out to be a vampire. She bites him,
As they usually do.
yeah, and he starts to turn into a vampire, and he falls in with her clan of vampires. What do you call
Her
it? Collection
biker
of
gang.
It's a gang.
It's a gang.
It's a gang.
Vampire
Yeah,
gang.
it's a gang.
Who
Vampire
roam
gang,
around
yeah.
the desert Southwest in an RV with all the windows blacked out with tinfoil and black spray paint. And they roam around killing people. And this is a film that is incredibly violent, incredibly profane, incredibly scary.
And has a score by
Tangerine Dream, which is a score.
Or is it Tangerine Nightmare?
It's a cast reunion of sorts from Aliens. The vampire gang is led by Lance Henriksen and includes Bill Paxton as a particularly psychotic vampire, and Jeanette Goldstein, who is another vampire, and then a child vampire. In some ways, it could be argued as being derivative of the Anne Rice books, which were incredibly popular at the time.
Huge.
I remember being a little turned off by the movie in 1987 because I thought it was kind of derivative of this stuff. But in retrospect, I really like this film. It's got some terrific set pieces in it. The two that stand out are the big bar scene where the biker gang or the vampire gang goes to this kind of shit kicker bar and terrorize the patrons, and it's a long scene and it's very violent and scary. And then there's a scene later in the film where the vampires take cover in a house or a motel during the daylight as law enforcement descends on them, and they get in a shootout. And as the bullets punch through the walls of this house, little streams of sunlight start going through it and burn the vampires, and they're trying to stay out of these beams of sunlight as they, try to escape.
And that, to my knowledge, is the
situation.
first time that was ever done. There's a similar sequence in the Coen Brothers' Blood Simple, which is also the shafts of light, but of course they weren't vampires in Blood Simple.
Right,
But
or
it's
bursting
such
into flames with
but it's such a great sequence. It's
Yeah.
really one of those classic. And that's been imitated many times since, but the first time it was done was by Kathryn Bigelow in this movie.
Yeah, I just think it's a wonderful vampire film, criminally underseen, especially now. Deserves a wider audience.
It's among my favorite films of all time. It's just so beautiful. I would use the word haunting, and so I shall use it because it is. There is just something that Kathryn Bigelow brings to it that there is a dreamlike quality to it, that you feel just a degree off of reality, but in a good way. Like, reality has gone ever so slightly wrong so that it's recognizable, it's tangible, it's graspable, but it hates you and it wants to kill you. And I think that that it's actually incredibly well acted. There's a certain naturalism to it that is very different for this kind of movie, and certainly in the 80s. And there's interesting stories around it, like the actress who played May, who is the girl who Adrian Pasdar from Heroes falls in love with, Jenny Wright. She disappeared after the making of this movie. In fact, if you can find it, and God, I think I might own it somewhere. The extra features on the Near Dark, like DVD or Blue, whenever the hell that was released and then went out of print. There's this astounding moment in that where Adrian Pasdar is being interviewed for sort of the documentary Look Back at Near Dark, and he just looks at the camera and he's like, "Jenny, if you're out there, we all miss you, we all love you. Please come back to us." And it just kicks you in the gut. But it's just the whole movie kicks you in the gut. It's just beautiful. I have one little issue with it. I have never found, but I go with it anyway because I love it. I've never found the solution to vampirism very convincing.
Yes.
But I just embrace it because the rest of it is so great. Can we do spoilers on this podcast?
Yeah,
Of
I
course.
mean, look,
sure.
I think
So he gets a blood transfusion from his father, and it's actually a cool scene. It's just conceptually, it just
It's
doesn't
weird.
quite reach the
And then he saves the girl the same way with a blood transfusion. Like, I didn't know blood transfusion was a cure for vampirism. But
Right.
I want
that's
to
what
point
it
out
is.
that one of the reasons we announced the films we're doing on social media is so, if somebody is so inclined, they can actually watch the movie before listening to the podcast if they haven't seen it. Because, obviously we can go into a lot more depth. It's a lot more interesting if we actually talk about it than try and dance around the fact
Obviously,
that
in order to find that out, follow us at 430 Movie Podcast on Twitter.
That's right. We're at 430 Movie Podcast at Twitter. We're also available. You can check us out on Facebook. Hit like on Facebook, the 430 Movie page. And then, of course, our website is 430movie.com.
And if you're listening, home video companies, you got to put this movie out. on high def. Maybe help us, Scream Factory. You're our only hope.
Yeah, right. No, I would agree. It was pretty cool for the time, and now after many years, it's still pretty cool.
And this is a film that came out kind of at the dawn of the modern vampire film movement.
Right.
There weren't a lot of vampire films out. There were a couple in the 80s, and we may discuss a couple of the other ones, but since 1987, there have been a lot more, and certainly in television with a ton of vampire shows on television.
Really?
But there weren't those revisionist vampire shows. A lot of it was goofy. It was parody stuff. This was really, it sort of reinvented the sort of, it was Breaking Bad before Breaking Bad was vampires. And
well, these weren't like the sexy, like hypnotic vampires, really.
Right.
I mean, they were a vicious gang that roamed around and victimized.
And it's so
people.
interesting, that at the time, Kathryn Bigelow was spending a lot of time with James Cameron. That's when she met them on the set of Aliens, and then decided to use them in Near Dark. I mean, it's a great story about why it's virtually the same cast.
And that's the time period where I was hanging around with James Cameron, and I actually had pizza with Bill Paxton in Jim Cameron's kitchen one day while I was hanging around there.
Did he flip out and tear your throat out with his face?
He didn't actually. He was more interested in the pizza, thank goodness.
Okay. Yeah.
But that was sort of my first real connection with actors and directors and things like that, and it was it made everything really real to me for the first time, and that was a very strange occurrence.
Let's take a moment to remember Bill Paxton. It was just a wonderful
we lost
actor.
him a couple years ago.
And a wonderful man. By all accounts, he was just a lovely guy.
Yep.
And
he plays such a bastard in this movie, and that's just a testament to what a terrific actor he is.
Yeah. No, Near Dark's a terrific film, and hopefully, like you said, somebody will salvage it so that it can get seen more, maybe, on the 4:30 movie. So that's Monday. Near Dark, a fine choice by Steve Melching. Daren Dochterman, Tuesday.
Tuesday, I get Tuesday, and on Tuesday, that means we're going back in time. Way back in time. Back beyond the 50s, beyond the 40s, beyond the 30s.
Beyond Ontario.
Since before your sun burned hot in the sky,
Not
I
quite
have
that
awaited a
much.
vampire movie.
But 8 years before the Bela Lugosi Dracula was 1922's Nosferatu.
Yes.
Excellent
It
choice.
is the scariest vampire movie I have ever seen. It was directed by F.W. Murnau in Germany, and it was actually an illegal film because they were trying to get around the copyright
It was the
of
original
Dracula.
fan film. It
yeah,
was-
I was going to mention that. They were dancing around the copyright of Dracula, which was a familiar book and stage play. And this was basically based on a stage play. But they changed all the names, so they thought it would be okay. In the end, they got sued by Bram Stoker's estate and got in all sorts of trouble, and it was unavailable for so many years.
Count
until
Orlok.
Orlok.
I don't like orange juice.
It's a silent film, so you'll have to do some reading of the subtitles. But oh my God, it is the visuals are unbelievable, and the character of Count Orlok, played by Max Schreck. Whether or not that's his real name or not, I think it's a wonderful touch. But he is just ghastly looking. He's not your ordinary bat flavored vampire. He's a rat. He looks like a giant human rat with a big bulbous head, and is the scariest thing you've ever seen. The way he moves, the way he looks at people, it's just so creepy. And I saw this when I was very young, and it screwed me up big time.
And this is a film that was made, at the dawn of motion pictures.
Yeah.
The filmmaking is truly astonishing for 1922.
Yeah, it's astonishing for any time.
What do you think of the remake, the Werner Herzog remake of Nosferatu?
It's interesting. Compared to the original, it's just night and
completely
day.
agree.
It's good. I mean, I think it's good.
It's
Werner Herzog
fine.
It's fine. It's not, but the original is
The original is
a
way
masterpiece, a classic. For
And
a
Steve
reason.
and I have talked about this before, where we went to see A Shadow of the Vampire, Telluride, which is about the making of
Right.
Nosferatu, and then we went to
A
see
fictionalized account.
fictionalized account. Then we went to see Nosferatu up on the hill overlooking Telluride, and you have to take
a
this
fully
giant
restored version with a live
orchestral accompaniment.
the Alloy Orchestra doing live musical accompaniment.
and it was remarkable. I mean, it was a remarkable experience. The film, to see it restored, it looked beautiful. It was terrifying and scary, and we come out in this dark and stormy and rainy night.
Literally raining, thunder, lightning.
And it's amazing because of the time period that it's made in. The distance you have from the reality of it makes you completely believe everything you see. Mm-hmm. So you don't look at it as a film; you look at it as a document of what actually happened, and it's a really amazing effect when you watch it.
I was actually fortunate enough to see it, but it was in Hollywood, to see it like a print with a live music performance. And it was the first time I'd ever seen it.
Right.
And I was actually just kind of blown away by it.
Yeah, yeah.
That somebody managed to accomplish that, in the 1920s is just fascinating to me.
It's staggering.
Yeah.
And let me give a little shout out here on the DVD edition, and I'm not sure if this special feature ported over to subsequent editions, but in the 90s there was a DVD edition that had a wonderful audio commentary track by a film scholar named Lockie Heiss, who was a classmate of mine and Daren's as well, I think, at USC Cinema School, and a silent film scholar. And he just gave this terrific audio commentary talking through the whole film. I recommend it very highly. Lockie Heiss.
Lokke.
Yeah.
Yeah, another excellent choice. So Monday, we're looking at Near Dark. Tuesday, Nosferatu. Wednesday.
All right. So we're going to set our Wayback Machines to not as far as Nosferatu, but to my senior year in college. And I met a young lady who eventually would become the mother of my children and also my wife. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision to ask her out on a date. I was riffing, I was just kind of using the force and being spontaneous. And so, look, I had a couple of rules about what sorts of movies to take a date to on a first date, right? It's like you never want to do anything that's too violent. You never want to do anything that has, like, explicit sex or nudity. You never want to do...
I took a girl on a first date to the movie Happiness. Big mistake.
Wow.
Well, that says more about
so
you
I took her
than...
to the last exit to Brooklyn, except we're talking about vampire movies. I decided it would be an awesome idea to take my future wife to see Bram Stoker's Dracula on our very first date. And you know
Francis
what?
Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Francis Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's a long title, but it works. But let me tell you something. So I think, look, there's no question that Keanu Reeves, who is amazing as Bill. Wait, he's Ted.
Ted
Theodore
Theodore Logan.
Logan.
Yes,
John
Theodore
Wick.
Logan. And he's John Wick. Is awesome in those films.
However-
he is a gigantic sort of black hole in the middle of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which in every other respect is just this beautiful film. It's just beautifully made. It's got so many smart ideas animating the filmmaking. You can see Coppola he's experimenting.
Well,
But you know what that is? He when he set out to make the movie, he said he would use no technique that was not available to the filmmakers who made the original Dracula. So that's why everything is either like stop
Therefore,
motion or matte paintings.
good acting was not among them.
Right. But
It's not a prerequisite.
Gary Oldman is fantastic in that movie.
Yeah.
And the thing that's really great, I think, about this film, other than the fact that it's beautiful and it sounds great,
It is
and
sumptuous.
the costumes, yes,
Absolutely sumptuous.
right? I can watch it again and again. It's the fact that it captures something in Dracula that frankly that earlier takes on the character never did, because all of those films were more or less based on the stage play, which ignored something really super duper important about the original novel, which is Bram Stoker didn't really write a horror novel. What he really wrote was a Tom Clancy techno thriller,
Right.
in which the plot was Dracula was this dude who was trying to take over the world. And what was arrayed against him were people who were using technology he did not understand. Mm-hmm. And if Dracula had been able to read a goddamn train schedule, that story would have turned out completely differently. But it's actually important to the storytelling. In the original novel, Mina Harker it's not a romance in the original novel. And I think it's actually brilliant the way that Coppola brings that into his film, and it's
that
beautiful.
really annoyed me at first when I first saw Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like, what's with this freaking romance? There's no romance in the novel.
But then it kind of emerged as this thing that made Dracula himself just very sympathetic. But in the original book, Mina Harker, her entire purpose was to be a Dracula detector. Right? Mm-hmm. It was like once they realized Van Helsing, it's like she actually can sense Dracula. Beep, 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 beep. It's like, okay, cool. She's a vampire Geiger counter. That's awesome. I love it. But I think Coppola actually elevates the material in so many ways. And it's material that's already elevated. It was already a classic, and he kind of created his own thing out of it. And it's just, it has that. We're not supposed to say certain words on this podcast.
We're not?
I guess not. Well, we shouldn't. Maybe I shouldn't, because I would say it too much once we release the Kraken of the F word. But
that's the Fracken.
Yeah, the Fracken. Release the Fracken. Oh my God! Now I forgot what the hell I was going to say, except for Fracken. So there you go.
Mina Harker,
Vampire, Jonathan Harker. Nope.
It's gone.
It's gone. Although again.
It'll be back.
It will be back. It
in
will
about
come back.
2 minutes.
Another great score as well.
Fantastic. How do you pronounce
Wolfrid Kilar?
Wojciech Kilar.
Yes. Yeah,
absolutely iconic score that has been used over and over again in movie trailers and other things. A wonderful score. And the first thing I did after I saw this movie was go buy that score.
And beautiful production design by my friend and now deceased boss Tom Sanders, who did an amazing job putting that together. It's just beautiful.
And Sony released it recently on 4K UHD, and it looks magnificent, or sumptuous, which is today's word of the day.
Right.
So I highly recommend the 4K version of that. But
dripping with sumptuous.
It was
goodness.
a really fascinating experiment, and Coppola was in the 90s, post flush with the success of The Godfather from the 70s, and then some of his other films. He was really experimenting, and then it got to the point where he really believed in that one for me, one for the studio thing, where he did like The Rainmaker with Matt Damon, but Dracula's a really interesting film, and the way that he chose to approach the adaptation of that book, and using that toolkit it's again, it's not a movie I love and I throw on a lot, but I admire the craftsmanship, and there's so much to love, particularly Gary Oldman.
I've traveled oceans of time to be here.
Well, and Anthony Hopkins
Yes.
is terrific in the film. One of his follow-ups to Silence of the Lambs
As Van
that came out
Helsing.
the following year.
Yeah, he's great. And just sort of weirdly feral in his own way in that movie. Like he comes off as a little bit crazier.
Yeah.
And more terrifying than Dracula does, right? Because our sympathies are with Dracula, which is really...
It's so interesting because he marries that whole mythology to the myth of Vlad the Impaler.
Right.
He gives this whole backstory, and it's interesting. And
I
an
love
attempt
it
to
with
really make
using
him more
the sort of the shadow
relatable.
puppets to tell the story of his history in Romania. Winona Ryder is, I don't want to be reductive, but she's absolutely gorgeous in this movie and delivers a terrific performance.
She steals the movie.
I didn't get that memo. Are we not allowed to say that she's gorgeous?
Well,
She is gorgeous in the movie.
Yeah.
she is, but she's more. She plays a terrific character.
No, she does. And she has to stand. Think about what she has to do in this film. Okay, so standing up to Keanu Reeves in this is like it's like she's on the bunny slope. But like all of a sudden she goes from that to like she's got like how many diamonds is the most number of diamonds on a ski slope? I don't know. I don't ski because I hurt myself. But Jesus Christ, she's doing scenes with Anthony Hopkins and Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And she brings it, and she's awesome.
Yeah.
You don't forget that she's in the movie. You very well could forget that she's in the movie, but you don't. And you believe that Gary Oldman's Dracula does cross oceans of time.
Well, that's the thing about, like when Stranger Things happen, everybody's, she's terrific. Well, she's been terrific in most of the things she's
right,
been in.
yeah.
I mean, from Heather's on.
That's
I
right.
mean,
You know what, babe? You know what I need?
Well, the
High school.
The
movie.
strange thing is that every time I think about this movie, I think about on The Simpsons, Mr. Burns dressed up as Gary Oldman with
big hair.
the big white hair
Right.
and the long red outfit, and I just crack up. I can't get that out of my mind now. So thank you, Simpsons.
And I will say also that that here's something very important that I learned from Bram Stoker's Dracula. That all of my rules about what sort of date to take somebody on a first date on were stupid. Because obviously it worked out. It was actually a really good choice. Not that she ever wants to see the movie again.
It's romantic.
But,
it's
yes.
scary. It's got all the things all the emotions you kind of want to go through.
Of course,
with,
now
I
she
think.
wants you to wear the wolf costume all the time.
Yeah, that's weird. So
And there's a lot to discuss afterwards, about that movie, because it's a movie that inspires discussion of, the technique and the adaptation and, the approach that he took. So, yeah, and it's romantic and sadistic. There's a lot going on there.
It won several Academy Awards. It won the Oscar for costume design and makeup and sound editing, and the art direction was nominated for an Oscar.
I think it would make a very good double feature with Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
dude.
Whoa, Mr. Dracula.
Well, if we are doing Keanu Reeves week this week, I'd like to nominate Dangerous Liaisons, which is another brilliant movie that he does no favors for. Are we not? Are we not going there?
I think that's in a couple weeks.
Okay.
Keanu Reeves.
We'll call it
You
Whoa
could
Week.
Make the argument that Dangerous Liaisons is a vampire.
I know
movie.
That's true, actually.
Yeah.
Malkovich should have played a vampire. Does Malkovich play a vampire in
That's not.
No.
That's not.
is a vampire.
That's not the same movie.
what?
Malkovich is in.
Malkovich is in Dangerous
Liaisons.
Liaisons. I'm talking
He's
about.
in Shadow of the Vampire.
Yeah, he's in Shadow of the Vampire,
He plays
right.
Murnau, right?
Yeah.
And it's what's his name?
William Dafoe is
Willem
is
Dafoe
Max Shrek.
plays
Yeah,
Shrek.
yeah.
But isn't Keanu Reeves in Valmont?
No, Keanu Reeves is in Dangerous Liaisons.
No, it's Elliot from E.T. in Valmont.
Yeah,
Is it?
Valmont
Yeah.
is the bad version of Dangerous Liaisons.
Well, I like them both.
Okay.
I like them both. We'll
It's
we'll
beyond
save
my
that for
control.
another week.
Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion.
Costume
It's
drama
just,
week.
It's
Yeah.
beyond my control.
So I have to ask you before.
That's all I have to say.
That, it's just like we look back at these movies. People say, "Why do you do a show like this?" And it's like, because, I know a lot of you think that basically film began with the MCU, but it's kind of like these movies are so brilliant.
All
and
these
if we
movies
can-
take up 8% of the 10% of the brain that we use. That's the problem.
There's so many movies that are worth a look if you haven't discovered them. And even after listening to some of this conversation, like I want to go back and watch Near Dark again. It's like I want to go back and watch Dracula. Okay, before I get to Thursday, I have a quick question for all of you.
Boy.
The answer is
So-
yes.
No.
So it's Halloween. Obviously, this week is
Right.
Halloween.
Obviously.
So, what candy are you going to be giving out at your house? Or what candy would you like?
We get a lot of trick-or-treaters in our neighborhood. We have a very high density, and sometimes Daren actually comes over because Daren lives in a low-density trick-or-treating neighborhood, and he'll help us hand out
I
candy.
live in a very hilly area where kids don't like to
They're
walk.
too lazy to walk up
They
the
are.
hill to get the candy.
And they heard about the crazy man.
Look, they like the Crazy Man, okay? Crazy Man is fun.
One year, Daren wore his full Darth Vader costume.
Yeah, aren't you a little short for Darth Vader? Yes, but it's still fun on Halloween.
Yeah.
Aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper?
But so I don't give out the cheap stuff. I mean, we don't give out full size candy bars, but we give out the quality candy. I prefer.
This isn't second-rate, no-name
no,
brand
it's not that knockoff
stuff.
It's the quality
These are
Hershey's.
quality
It's
bags.
not Nestle's chocolate.
Messleys.
Full size peanut butter cups and Hershey's candy bar. Fun size candy bars.
What are you going to dress as? Do you dress in costume still or no?
Sometimes I was David S. Pumpkins last year, but
Question?
Halloween is one of those holidays I've always loved, but I've never really had a great costume for it because I'm not particularly good at I can't make them myself, and my mother, bless her heart, actually made me a really great vampire costume one year. She made me a really great Dracula cape, a lined cape with a red lining and a high collar and everything. I love that costume.
My favorite Halloween candy is Fun Dip. You remember Fun Dip?
Oh, sure, yeah.
It had a sugar stick and 3 packets of like sugar powder that was flavored, arguably different ways, but it's all the same.
Hello to my little friend.
Yeah, but you lick the sugar stick and you dip it in, and some of the powder sticks to it, and you taste it like that. It's goofy, but it's fun, and I remember it from when I was a kid. So shut up, Ashley.
It's funny because my birthday is right around Halloween, so I used to have my birthday parties usually the weekend before Halloween, so they would be costume parties at Lola's, the late lamented Lola's, which we miss very much, but. It was funny because I remember very vividly the year that Steve came as Indiana Jones and Daren came as Tote, and he came, as the Nazi antagonist Indiana Jones, and he had I
had the headpiece,
of Staff of Ra
burn on my hand.
Burned on his hands.
I had a glowing poker, and I had the Nazi pin. Well, interestingly enough, the day before that, I was working at Universal on The Grinch. And, of course, we had a little costume get-together at work. And I didn't realize when I wore my costume into the office that in the same building across the hallway was Steven Spielberg's Shoah Foundation.
Oh, no.
Oh, my God.
Jesus.
Oh, my God.
I realized this
God.
as I was walking into my office and thinking, oh, my God, please no one come out of there. Please no one come out of there. Please no one come out of there. Luckily, no one came out of there. But
that is,
I was just thinking, oh, my God, this is
faux pas.
completely inappropriate.
Yeah.
But I could have
Not
said,
as inappropriate as
Steven
having
thought of
Hitler,
this.
as Hitler sign autographs for
Right.
Indiana Jones,
Right.
but it's up there. That's wild. And I have to say, these parties were great, but they were a little more sedate than, like, say, for instance, Rob's Eyes Wide Shut birthday party, which we will not talk about on this podcast because it's non-explicit.
It was a costume party of sorts.
Sort of.
Lack thereof. So, Mr. Ashley Miller, what candy do you like to give out at your house?
Well, traditionally, I've liked to give out candy that I just wanted to eat while I was waiting for the little freaks to show up at my door. So I preferred...
So you have the strategy of you buy the candy that you would eat, not the candy that you wouldn't eat. So if it doesn't get passed out, you throw it all away.
See, that's what I do. I buy the candy I wouldn't eat, so I don't eat it when.
And that's why kids hate going to your house.
Because I can't stand to watch it go to waste. So I would normally give out Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, which are my very favorite. However, recently, and this kind of ties into my favorite costume I've ever done, but I think I can now wear again. Recently, I've changed my dietary habits. So Reese's Peanut Butter Cups are no longer on the menu. So I think this year we'll probably give out Kit Kats because they're my 9-year-old's favorite candy, and I suspect that he will eat them all. And he's a tiny boy, so he could probably use a Kit Kat or two. But my favorite costume, 10 years ago, I dressed up as Ash from The Evil Dead. And man, I went through Army of Darkness frame by frame, figuring out where the blood splotches were, where the tears were, how things were folded, where the blood was on his face. It was just detailed. And, he was pretty skinny in that. Well, in 2008, so was I. And then things happened. Things happened to a man.
Things.
Right? And I'm like, well, I can't ever dress up like that again. But now Bruce Campbell's reprised his role as Ash in Ash versus the Evil Dead, and he is Ash-sized now. So I think I can go back and I can do that costume.
I have a question for you. Have you ever dressed as Ash from Alien?
No, but... No, I haven't.
Have you ever dressed as Ashley from Gone with the Wind?
No.
You should hit for the Ash cycle.
Right?
That reminds me.
Yeah. Although I was imagining the Ash from. No, wait. Was that Ian Holm?
Yeah, that's what we said from Alien. Ash from Alien.
Yeah, I could just get one of those little cartons of milk,
Yeah. And just,
That's great. Your kids wouldn't be too traumatized by
totally.
that
Put a little jump
when you come home with your head in
as
your.
if they are traumatized already.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
oh, yeah,
Look who we're
absolutely.
dealing with.
On a daily basis.
I did dress as one of my namesakes once, Steve Austin.
That's correct. I
Astronaut
remember
at a friend of ours' costume
A
wedding.
man barely alive.
But you were so dedicated to realism, you poked out your own freaking eye.
Do you have a movie you like to watch on Halloween? Is that anything you turn on?
Monster Squad.
I mean, I tend to watch horror movies all month long in October.
Yeah.
So
It's
I don't
Monster
watch
Fest.
a specific one on Halloween night, but
Right.
yeah.
They say there are no monsters, no real ones, but there are.
So you watch Aliens?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so Thursday.
Back to movie week. Back to the 4:30 movie.
It's Vampire Week on the 4:30 movie. And Monday was Near Dark. Tuesday, Nosferatu. Wednesday, Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah. Okay, fine. I can't say it. It's a lot of words. It's a lot of words. Too many words. Too many notes. So Thursday, a lot of fine vampire movies we haven't talked about. So I'm going to pick one that's not so fine.
Oh boy.
He's riffing.
No, I'm not. I'm not riffing. I'm going with Tony Scott's first movie. High style, high fashion, high. You got to be high to love this movie. No, I love it. I love it. The Hunger, Kathryn Deneuve and Susan Sarandon, and David Bowie in actually one of his most memorable roles with beautiful makeup effects by Dick Smith. It's not a movie without its flaws. It's based on the novel by Whitley Strieber, which makes a lot more sense than the movie. Tony Scott. This was a movie where he really emerges from his brother's shadow. It's stylish. It's clearly influenced by the MTV era aesthetic of the mid '80s. But I saw it in the most uncomfortable of ways.
In the back of a Volkswagen?
No. Vincent Canby, who was the New York Times film critic at the time, gave it a rave review in the New York Times. So my mother, I was in high school at the time, says, Vincent Canby, gave us a great review. We should go see this. Now, of course.
Oh, God.
So I went with my mother to see the greatest lesbian vampire movie of all time. Now, of course, I know some people say, the vampire lovers, Hammer Horror. No, it's The Hunger. And Kathryn Deneuve and Susan Sarandon. Now, at the time, I didn't hate Susan Sarandon for voting third party. I used to love Susan Sarandon, who had been in so many great movies. And, of course, Kathryn Deneuve, who could do no wrong. So to have them as these vampires, female vampires, who literally sit at the piano and play "Lock Me." It's a song about two women. It's just such a great movie, and again, that the first 10 minutes of that movie, the montage is extraordinary, where basically Deneuve and Bowie's character are like these swingers who are visiting with Anne Magnuson because they're looking for their prey, and then they bring them to this beautiful 5-story walk-up brownstone in Manhattan where they incinerate the bodies of their victims. It's just so stylish and so cool, and it's so 80s in the very best of ways. And while it doesn't quite make sense, it really heralds the fact, of Tony Scott, as a major visual stylist who would then, the interesting thing about The Hunger, which was not a successful movie for MGM at the time, MGM UA, is that Tony Scott's next movie is Top Gun.
Right.
So, this was the last time he's doing something that's sort of really arty, that's not quite commercial, that, he also is, he's partnered with his brother doing commercials, but hasn't really done a feature yet. It's a really interesting artifact of its time, of Tony Scott's career. I just love the movie, and that's my nomination for Thursday, is The Hunger.
But The Hunger, very briefly, I guess, became a show.
Showtime series.
Showtime,
Two seasons. The last
seasons.
anthology series.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because the first season, I think Terrence Stamp was the host, and then the second season was David Bowie.
No kidding.
Yeah, and David Bowie, it just gives such a great performance in The Hunger because, of course, something goes wrong with him, and he starts aging really rapidly. And Dick Smith does the makeup prosthetics, and he's literally, there's a great scene where he's waiting for an appointment with an aging specialist played by Susan Sarandon, and she keeps him waiting because she thinks he's just a crank. And over the course of like the half hour he's waiting in the lobby, he ages by decades. And then she comes out and she sees him and Mr. Blaylock, and she can't believe it. It's just an extraordinary scene. So again, The Hunger is a flawed movie, but it has so many great moments in it. Of course, William Dafoe does a cameo. I think it's one short, very small role. But just so many things to recommend. And if you haven't seen the movie, it's just great and sumptuous. If I may steal a word from Ashley Miller.
For you young people listening at home, it has nothing to do with the Hunger Games. Okay, those are completely different things. It would be interesting to somehow link them together.
The Hunger Games.
The Hunger Games.
I do remember coming out of the screen,
Right.
Seeing the movie at the Kingsway in Brooklyn, and my mom said, "Well, that was interesting."
No kidding. I have to say, I'll give you this much, Mark. I saw The Hunger with my mom. Definitely beats. I saw Bram Stoker's Dracula on a first date
with your
my
wife to be. I mean, it was literally like that was when people like Vincent Canby and Pauline Kael and Siskel and Ebert, film criticism mattered. It wasn't these idiots who know nothing about movies in their basement writing reviews,
making podcasts.
Right.
Making podcasts, and so if you read a review that was, and it really, said this is a really stylish, special, interesting movie, it could drive you to go see something that you would normally see. God, it's just so mortifying. And then it became a perennial on HBO.
Sure.
And so you watch it together every year.
And it was one of the first Laserdiscs I ever bought, too. Yeah,
Merry Christmas, Mom.
But, and it has a very interesting atonal score.
Yes.
It's just a really fascinating movie, and you see sort of a lot of the tricks of Tony Scott's career that would come back, because he's made better movies, Crimson Tide, obvious Spy Game, but you really see that the seeds of his career being planted in this film. And it's gonzo and it's weird and it makes no sense, but there's so many things that I think are special about it. And of course, it's also the first time that he uses that Schubert tune that he uses in virtually every movie he ever made, the Schubert trio that is so familiar in the oeuvre of Tony Scott. But I love The Hunger. I'm unapologetic fan, and that's my nomination for Thursday.
Stop apologizing.
Great.
But
right, you're unapologetic.
I'm unapologetic. I'm unapologetic, and you can't go wrong with Catherine Deneuve and Susan Sarandon as vampires because they are great in it.
Yes. Which brings us...
Even if she did vote for Jill Stein, which is unforgivable. Okay, so for Friday, let's talk about some of the other movies that could be eligible that we haven't talked about. There's so many.
There are a lot of really terrific vampire films.
Would you say there are a plethora of
plethora?
vampire
A
films?
myriad, perhaps.
I don't think that word means. What do you think it means?
I just got to throw this out. I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention 1930s Todd Browning's Dracula.
Yeah, I think that's true.
The Mexican version or the
I
English
was going to talk about that too, but they're both, obviously the original with Bela Lugosi is the definitive Dracula film.
It defined Dracula for decades.
Yeah.
And there were so many. I mean, how many different versions of it did Hammer do?
Right.
Dracula, Dracula Rises from the Grave, exploitation movies, Blackula, they're just there's so many Dracula movies.
Dracula.
Dr. Acula.
Yeah.
Dracula waits till late afternoon to go outside.
And then you get into the revisionist stuff like Marvel's Blade, which
Sure.
was sort of one of the first Marvel movies that ever really worked. People forget,
That world above you is just a sugar-coated topping.
and then George Romero's revisionist vampire movie Martin.
I was going to mention Martin. Really interesting.
And Chris Sarandon is so great in Fright Night as with Roddy McDowall.
Love Fright Night. Love Fright Night.
Absolutely.
It's just that was such a great marriage of things that were truly scary. Like it wasn't screwing around with the with the frightening stuff, with the horror stuff, right? It treated that very seriously, but it allowed the film to be funny and sort of feel like these were real people that were in the middle of it. It was actually, I think, a much better interpretation for film of Salem's Lot than any of like the filmed versions of Salem's Lot. It was that very sort of Stephen King, hey, here are all these horrors and things that go bump in the night that you love and you remember, except we're going to contemporize them. And we're going to put them in suburbia, and that's just what is brilliant about it.
Written by Tom Holland of Cloak and Dagger fame.
Damn right.
And you know what's interesting is that really is a product of its time because of course it's about a horror show host like
and one of those late night hosts.
One of those late night horror show hosts, which don't really exist now.
Count
And I'd be very
Vidal.
curious to see sort of for younger fan, watching it, how they would embrace the movie, not sort of getting the concept of what Svengoolie or these kind of guys that hosted Chiller Theater or whatever late at night. That was a staple of our TV watching at the time, and that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, which is kind of sad. But it sort of exists now. It's like if you there are certain horror streaming services that will do like what's his name? Is it Joe Bob Briggs?
Oh,
yeah.
right.
But Ronnie McDowell's so great, and then you had Stephen Jeffries who went on to do, I guess, gay porn after that. It was so weird because he was like a staple of the '80s, movies as well. And then Amanda Bierce, who's wonderful in it as it's really Friday Night's a really wonderful little movie.
We're talking about the 1985
version,
not the
DreamWorks remake. I haven't even seen the DreamWorks remake.
It is ungood.
So I think this isn't going to be my suggestion, but no discussion of vampire films is complete without 1987's Joel Schumacher film, The Lost Boys.
I think that's a great movie. It's again, it kind of captures that sense of these kids who sort of feel real, even though they kind of live in this very, very heightened reality. And it took advantage of the story being, it's not just, hey, we guess there's vampires like in our neighborhood, but just really playing on the fact that that Jason Patrick, who's in the lead, Corey Haim, who's his little brother, they show up in this new town they don't know anything about.
The murder capital of the world.
Exactly. They're already, strangers. And it just, it goes from there in this really fascinating way. Kiefer Sutherland is completely fantastic. Jamie Gertz as well. And apparently this movie started off as almost a horror response to The Goonies, right? That it was supposed to be children, that they were supposed to be younger, that Star wasn't supposed to be female. There was going to be, like, the Frog Brothers were, like, precocious 8-year-olds. And to his credit, Joel Schumacher, of all people, made the excellent decision, we should age this up.
Yeah.
And we should make it sexier. And he really did, and he did it awesome.
And brought in shirtless saxophone player.
Yes.
Yeah, which is, look,
I still believe.
the music in that movie is just, he selects it perfectly. It's basically, look, it's not like the Schumacher oeuvre is just filled with great films, but Lost Boys is legitimately
a modern
great.
classic. It's a modern classic.
And Steve's saying I wouldn't pick this for Friday, but I kind of
would.
would.
Yeah.
I would go into the
I
weekend with the
haven't-
Coreys. I mean, how can you?
Well, let's continue talking about this, but I have another one I'll bring up. But Lost Boys is.
Also Daren had a great suggestion with Todd Browning's Dracula, but Lost
Boys came out about 2 months before Near Dark. It's actually in a lot of ways the same story about a young person falling in with a coven of vampires and being ambivalent about being turned into a vampire and not
problem
wanting
with Santa
to
Clara.
embrace the
Too many damn vampires.
One of the greatest. Was that the last line of the film? One of the greatest lines of all time.
Yep.
You want to say it again?
That's the problem with Santa Clara. Too many damn vampires.
One thing I never could abide about Santa Clara.
That's right.
All the goddamn vampires. It's just brilliant. Spoiler alert, but it's so great. This is a film that I watch every year around Halloween. I probably watch all the films we've discussed around Halloween, except for The Hunger.
Well, you should.
I want to see it. I haven't seen it in years.
Yeah, when your mom comes to visit, hey, Mom, you want to see The Hunger? I'm just going to throw on The
See
Hunger
it tonight
which
with
is a
your
beautiful
mom.
Blu-ray from Warner Archives.
I'll pick that.
In that case,
I
definitely
did bring home the
watching it, Mom.
VHS tape of Blue Velvet to watch with my mom once.
Jesus
that was
Christ.
Oh my God, that's worse, dude. That's
don't look
worse.
at me.
Not worse in terms of a movie because it's a classic,
brilliant
it's a
movie.
masterpiece. But But
Don't watch
watching
that
that
with
with your
your
mom,
mother.
do not watch that with your mom.
Don't watch with your mom week.
Oh, I love it. And the worst thing is, I had already seen Blue Velvet like twice in the theater, and I still thought it was a good idea to rent this movie on VHS. And, hey, Mom, this is a really good movie. Should we
You are
watch
out
it?
of your cotton picking mind or whatever.
Wow.
So anyway, the other vampire movie I wanted to throw out there for discussion was a film that came out a couple years ago, directed by Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement.
Oh, The Shadows.
What We Do in the
yeah.
Shadows.
Yeah.
A fabulous mockumentary made down in New Zealand starring Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi and Rhys Darby as the leader of a werewolf pack. We're werewolves, not swearwolves.
Werewolves.
It's a movie that pokes fun at all of the vampire tropes and werewolf tropes that we've seen over the decades. It's about a group of roommates, vampire roommates, that share a house, and they're all different ages. They're all made into vampires in different eras. And my favorite one is Peter, who's 6,000 years old, that looks just like Nosferatu.
Yeah.
He lives down in the basement. He's got the big teeth, the big bald head. It is hilarious, this movie. I highly recommend it to anyone who is a lover of vampire films. It's recent, so a lot of you have probably seen this movie. But if you haven't, do yourself a favor. It's a blast.
I want to throw out a couple more.
Please do.
Let the Right One In.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Great choice.
It's extremely well done. The American remake is also pretty good, but it's not as good as the original. My second one is
Twilight.
Jeff Goldblum.
Twilight.
Jeff Goldblum, Ed Begley Jr., Gina Davis, Transylvania 5000
wow.
Yeah, Transylvania 65000.
from 1985. It's terrible, but
Yeah.
you need to see it.
Yeah.
You
With your
absolutely
mom.
need to see it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I wouldn't watch this with my mom either.
On the boat, not.
But it's
Not with green eggs and ham.
you will not believe it.
Yeah.
You will simply not believe it.
I already don't.
I would also say we could consider From Dusk Till Dawn, Robert
Yeah.
Rodriguez's high octane pulp movie which is really two movies. It's the first hour with Quentin and George Clooney, and then it becomes this vampire movie in the second half, and then was spun off as a TV series. And then Innocent Blood, John Landis's with Anne Perlard from La Femme Nikita, and Don Rickles.
There was a movie I had such high hopes for.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then there's the 1979 remake of Dracula,
Right?
which is interesting with Frank Langella playing Dracula.
Oh yeah, that's true. We didn't
Another
talk about
good
that.
John Williams score.
Indeed.
Yeah, not
Great John
but,
Williams score. Great John
great,
Williams score.
yeah.
I
Good.
love that score.
It's a good score.
Sweeping.
Yeah.
And
Sumptuous.
and sumptuous. Yeah,
Especially if you like
I
Cloud
have to
City.
say, I listen to that score a lot.
Okay.
I like
I need
that
to get
score
it. I don't
quite a
have.
bit.
I actually don't own that.
Oh, it's a really good score, and especially when I was writing, doing any horror stuff, that was on my, writing playlist for that. And then I love that. I think that's an overlooked John. I heard he played in concert.
He did, yeah,
recently,
last
and
year,
I wish I had heard it because I love that score.
I'd like to play for you a little tune that we did for Dracula back in the 70s. I think you'll like it. Our first violinist enjoys this very much. So here it is.
Thank you, John Williams.
Wow.
Wow, we really,
You never know who's going to drop
show
by
up at
the
the 4:30
Electric
movie.
Entertainment.
That's a great thing about being here at Electric because there's so many big people that come by to the studios, and we're able to pull them in briefly to talk on
You
our
call them
podcast.
big people.
Get out of here, John Williams.
Okay, so we got to make a decision. We got a lot of possible movies to consider for Friday. I'm leaning towards Lost Boys.
I am too.
Yeah, I think I'll go there too.
Yeah, see What We Do in the Shadows. It's a great comedy. It would be a great aperitif, but
Yeah,
Lost
for sure.
Boys is a classic.
And it's a cautionary tale of going to Santa Clara and
Bela's going to be
being
pissed,
aware.
but, hell
And
with
it
him.
will also teach you things like, when somebody, say they're called Warner Brothers, announces that, Tim Burton isn't doing another Batman movie, but they got Joel Schumacher to do it. And suddenly you get super excited because you really love Lost Boys, and you're hoping maybe he does something like that with Batman. And then all of a sudden, what the?
Oh, by the way, I forgot to say one more thing about The Hunger, because you mentioned Bela
boy.
Lugosi. the movie opens with Bauhaus's Bela Lugosi's Dead, which is sort of a meta statement about the whole, revisionist vampire thing. But it's this great MTV kind of montage of the killing and the murder and the getting rid of the bodies and stuff to Bela Lugosi's Dead, which works just marvelously well. So even if you watch the first 15 minutes of that movie, move on to Thursday. But you can come home from school, say, I'm not going to do my homework. I'm going to watch. Mom, you should come here, watch The Hunger with me.
Yeah, movies that will never be on at 4:30.
Vincent Canby loved it.
Right.
So did Mark Altman. Yes?
No, I was just checking the clock.
Oh, yeah, well, the big clock. So listen, I think we have some winners here. I think we have Monday. I lost my list.
Monday's Near Dark.
Monday is Near Dark. And then Tuesday, we have Nosferatu. Wednesday is Francis Ford Coppola's presents Bram Stoker's Dracula. Thursday is my mom's favorite movie, The Hunger. And Friday is Lost Boys, Joel Schumacher's classic film with the Coreys. And that is Vampire Week's a great way to celebrate your Halloween. And
scary.
Scary boys and girls.
If that's not enough, you should check out Lore on Amazon. Ashley is a producer on that, and it will have premiered by the time you hear this episode. It's worth checking out. And then Steven Melching, Star Wars Resistance, is playing on the Disney Channel. And, of course, the 4:30 Movie Store is open 24/7. So if you're sitting at home behind your computer, it's 3 a.m, and you feel like picking up some great 4:30 Movie swag, check that out at 430movie.com.
That's right.
430movie.com.
Correct.
And if you're sitting at home at 3 a.m. and want to read about Battlestar Galactica, you can also pick up my new book, So Say We All, The Oral History of Battlestar Galactica, available wherever books are sold. You can follow us on social media at 430 Movie Podcast, or you can like us on Facebook. And also visit us at 430movie.com. We want to extend our special thanks to everyone here at Electric Studios, especially our engineer, the great Bill Ritter, who makes it all possible. And we look forward to seeing you next week with an all-new episode of the 430 Movie.
Get out of here and watch some movies already.
And don't buy cheap candy. Those kids deserve quality candy.
And
get them a
don't
Reggie bar.
Don't watch Sex with Your Mom.
That is for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. God, that's a mortifying memory.
That's the true horror of Halloween.
Join us next time.
Bye now.
Happy Halloween.